Hi, good evening. Welcome to Glenbrook South's Parent Advisory Council Educational Evening. Our topic for this evening is current trends in adolescent substance abuse. I'm so thrilled that you could either make it out in person or we have a lot of parents and guardians joining us at home this evening via the Zoom. So thank you for your participation in this very important topic. For those of you who follow our board meetings, last fall, we had a board meeting specifically on the epidemic of vaping amongst our adolescents. And as part of that presentation, it came to our attention that it would probably be a good topic to share with all of our parents to strengthen the partnership between home and school regarding not only vaping, but a variety of substance abuse. So we are very blessed to have a strong partnership with the Glenview Northbrook Coalition for Youth and Miss Erin Teggy is here with us this evening. She's actually had a lot of strong partnerships with both Glenbrook North and Glenbrook South over the years. So she's going to be here this evening to share her experience and her expertise, and we're incredibly grateful. Welcome.
All right, thank you so much for having me. I always enjoy talking with parents in the Glenbrook communities. So we do have a lot of information that we're going to cover tonight. The good thing is, even though I will talk through things very quickly, everyone can absolutely have access to my slides. So don't worry if you don't remember everything that I say or go over. Always happy to share the information providing. So here's a list of everything that we're going to get through tonight. Little introduction, little bit of data, not too much data, but just to kind of set the stage and get an idea of what is happening with our youth in regards to substance use. We're going to go over e-cigarettes, cannabis. Those can be clumped together as vaping, some current trends in alcohol, talk about the current trends in fentanyl, which has not totally impacted Illinois as it has other locations, but it is an important conversation to start having. And then how you as parents, guardians, grandparents, aunts, uncles, whatever your role in the teen's life that brings you here tonight, how you can support them, questions that you can ask, how you can talk about these really important topics. And then we will have time at the end for questions, both from folks here in the building as well as online. So I'm going to try not to look at questions until the end, which is really hard for me. So I work with a number of different organizations. I am employed by Peer Services, which is a local substance use prevention and treatment agency. I'm the prevention director there, but I'm also highly involved and help lead the Glenview Northbrook Coalition for Youth, which is a drug-free community coalition here in Glenview Northbrook. And we work with a lot of community partners to really address and focus on how we can prevent underage substance use of any kind in the Glenview Northbrook communities. So jumping right into the data, whenever we're talking about substance use among teens, it's always really helpful to actually know what is happening. We hear things, we see things on social media, we hear people talk, we have our kind of own assumptions, our own perceptions, but what actually is happening with our youth? So the data that I have on this slide comes from the Illinois Youth Survey. So the Illinois Youth Survey is a statewide survey that lots and lots and lots of high school students, including the Glenbrooks. So this particular data set does include Glenbrook student data, and it asks lots of questions about substance use, perceptions, different behaviors and attitudes. And so I just pulled alcohol use rates, marijuana use rates, and e-cigarette use rates. And you can see I have 2018, 2020, and 22 on here. The great thing is we see downward trends among all of those substances, which is really exciting. And just to kind of get an idea of how many students actually are using. A lot of times, not only our students, but us as adults, we think that everybody's using. Oh my gosh, all the 12th graders are using before they go to college. It's the whole thing, rite of passage, etc. But as you can see, actually in 2022, when this data was collected, so it was this past spring, 32% of 12th grade students drank alcohol in the past 30 days. So, it really helps us to gauge what actually is happening when we look at the data that we have about our students, so that we can have these conversations with our teens and really help understand that majority of kids aren't using. And that's amazing. It's why I do my job. And it's really, really good just to kind of understand that. We've seen such steep downward trends in e-cigarette use. Our kids are getting way more information than 5, 6 years ago on e-cigarettes, and they're really learning and understanding kind of the risks and harms that e-cigarettes have. And we see that reflected in our data. And that's really exciting and really encouraging just about kind of the trends that we're seeing. And I will say this particular data is also reflective of statewide Illinois data, also nationwide data. We're seeing a downward trend across the board, which is really exciting. Even marijuana has decreased, even with legalization in Illinois that happened in 2020. So there are really good things happening in our communities. Parents, grandparents are talking to their kids, it's getting in health classes, lots of good things are happening. So this is the only other data piece that I'm going to share. And this is absolutely my favorite slide ever. Favorite data point to share. And it's really, really impactful for parents and guardians to really understand the impact that you have on the teens in your life. So what this whole graph shows, so part of the survey, there's a question that asks the students, you know, how much do they think their parents approve or disapprove of youth use? So whether that's alcohol or binge drinking, e-cigarettes, marijuana, prescription drugs, et cetera. And they can respond, oh, my parents strongly disapprove, they approve, or they strongly approve. Then we take that particular data set and we cross-tab that with 30-day use so that we can really look at how much they're perceiving parental approval or disapproval, and does that actually impact their behaviors? Absolutely 100% yes, it does. The students who know that their parents strongly disapprove of them using a substance, they're in the light blue all the way on the left. So for alcohol, for example, only 9% of those students have used alcohol in the past 30 days, compared to the students for alcohol, where students who think their parents strongly approve of alcohol use, 65% of them have used alcohol in the past 30 days. So what parents you say 100% matters. I'm a parent as well. I know often I don't think my kids are listening to me. They're still little, but you know, sometimes it can get really challenging to have these conversations and think, oh my gosh, they're not listening to me. I'm saying the same thing over and over again. You know, is it getting through into their head? It absolutely is, because our data shows that. When you have really open conversations with your teens, express that disapproval of use, their usage rates significantly lower. And that's, I think, really empowering for parents and guardians to know that. That absolutely makes a difference. It's my favorite slide. All right, so jumping into substances. So for e-cigarettes, we're gonna go over some of the latest devices, impact and consequences of use, withdrawal, some resources for quitting, just to get an idea of what's going on with e-cigarettes nowadays. They have been around. They've been popular for, I think, going on like 8 years now. They are basically, I'm sure you all have seen them or heard of them. It is an electronic battery operated device that heats up some sort of liquid that has nicotine in it, and then the person inhales that. What they're inhaling is an aerosol. It is not water. It is not just flavoring. There's lots and lots of different things in it. They are called a variety of different things, and those names change all the time as to what they're called. E-cigs, vapes, dab pens, ends, mods, pod mods. The latest I heard from the SROs in the district, the school resource officers, is now they're called bars, which I have some examples of that in a couple slides, but this is the basic makeup of what an e-cigarette is. So what e-cigarettes used to be, they used to be very much those pod-based systems. So Juul, of course, is the most popular one that was, you know, part of the huge epidemic issue with vaping. Students don't use those anymore, mainly because you had to recharge them, refill them, get new pods, etc. Now, what they use are totally disposable products. You don't have to recharge them, you don't refill them, you use it, and then you throw it away. So some of the devices that we have been seeing around here in the community is Breeze, Posh, Elf Bar, These are just some of the brands that we're seeing in the community. And as you can see, they're very bright and colorful. All of the disposable vapes still have lots and lots of different flavors, but we aren't seeing kind of those pod-based systems that we were seeing a number of years ago. And a lot of that has to do with some policy change that happened. So because, I'm sure you probably remember Juul was in the news a lot just about their marketing and advertising and targeting youth for their products. And so one of the pieces of legislation that happened is that all of the pod-based systems, so the ones that you had to get a new pod and recharge, they can no longer sell flavored products. And one of the things that we have learned over the years through a lot of research, different surveys, the National Youth Tobacco Survey is a really big one where we get a lot of information from, is youth who are using e-cigarettes, 85% of them are using them because they're flavored. And so, us as adults, us on the policy end of things, it's like, okay, let's get rid of those flavors. We're gonna, help this epidemic, help get fewer and fewer youth using e-cigarettes, because if it doesn't taste like strawberry or chocolate cake or creme brulee or mango or you name it, it's out there, youth are gonna be less likely to use these products. However, while that policy change happened for pod-based systems, which was great, so no more flavors for Juul, no more flavors for other of those types of devices, they did not include disposable vapes. And that is really why we've seen this shift in youth and teens using the 100% disposable vapes, e-cigarettes, because they do still have those flavors. So all of the thousands and thousands and thousands of flavors that are out there still exist in the disposable vapes. And that's why we're seeing kind of that trend and that shift to youth using these products, because they still can access those flavors. So there is a variety of policy happening at the national level to eliminate any flavored tobacco product, just as a way to really help decrease the amount of youth who are using these products. So one of the really helpful things in understanding e-cigarettes is comparing them to traditional cigarettes. So whenever I'm talking to students, we always do kind of a compare and contrast. And this always usually hits home really, really well with our students, even 5th, 6th, middle school, as young as that, because all of our teens, all of our kids know smoking cigarettes is bad. That message definitely has gotten through in society over the decades. And so really being able to compare e-cigarettes to traditional cigarettes is really, really helpful when talking to teens. And so there's a couple different aspects that we talk about. And the biggest one is understanding kind of that nicotine content and understanding how kind of the nicotine gets into the system, impacts the brain, et cetera. And with e-cigarettes, what most of the devices use is what we call nicotine salts. How these brilliant minds who created these things came up with this, I don't know. I wish they'd use their brilliance for good. But what these nicotine salts do that's in this e-liquid, your body absorbs it significantly faster and at higher levels than traditional cigarettes, which is what we call free-base nicotine. And so those who are using e-cigarettes, the nicotine's getting into their bloodstream, into their brain much faster and at higher levels. And so I would say a couple years ago when Juul was big, the whole big kind of thing in our world or my world, the prevention world, it was 1 pod equals 1 pack. So back in the day, 1 Juul pod had the nicotine equivalent of 1 pack of cigarettes. Kids understood that. I always knew when I was talking to a student who used, when I told them that, because the look on their face was just this, oh no, panic moment. In really understanding, because what teen is going to sit there and smoke an entire pack of cigarettes? Nobody. They know that's bad. They know the risks. They know the consequences. But at the time, 1 Juul pod was the exact same thing as smoking an entire pack of cigarettes. And if you've ever seen someone vape or use an e-cigarette, it's a super fast process, and they can go through one of those devices really, really fast. However, what we have seen, let's skip ahead. Where'd that slide go? Oh no, that's okay. What we've seen though now is that a lot of these disposable vapes now have thousands of puffs So whereas a pack of cigarettes is about 200 puffs, we're seeing these devices now, these disposable ones, and they market this. It's like, oh, this is 1,500 puffs. This is 2,000 puffs. This is 3,000 puffs, 5,000 puffs. So if one pack of cigarettes is 200 puffs, all of a sudden when we're talking thousands of puffs, now we're talking one e-cigarette is 5 packs of cigarettes, 6 packs of cigarettes, 7 packs of cigarettes. It is a lot of nicotine going into their system in a short period of time. And that kind of message really gets across to our teens. So the other thing that we always talk about with teens that is really useful is really understanding that it is an aerosol and not a vapor. It's very confusing because of the names. You think vapor, you automatically think water. What's the harm in that? But there are lots and lots and lots of unsafe, harmful, cancer-causing ingredients that are in these devices. Lead, nickel, tin, acetone, formaldehyde, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Things that are used in, nail polish remover and fireworks and de-icer for your windshield. All of these chemicals are in these vapes. Still to this day, e-cigarette companies are not required to list all of their ingredients. And so still, we don't know everything that is in these devices. But all of that stuff is going into the user's lungs and it's just sitting there, hanging out, not going anywhere. So all of these chemicals, metal particles, et cetera, are getting into their lungs. And that also is a really helpful understanding point for teens, and just kind of understanding that it's not just water, it's not just flavor, there are all these other things in there. So when we think of how nicotine kind of affects the body, nicotine is highly, highly, highly addictive. Almost 90% of adult smokers began using before the age of 18. And so thinking about just kind of the adult smoking population, if 90% of them began when they were in high school, that just kind of shows how addictive nicotine is. A lot of folks in the field compare the addictive quality of nicotine to that of heroin or cocaine. So it's highly addictive. If you've ever known anyone who's tried to quit nicotine, it's really hard because it is so addictive. And so if we can push back, keep our kids from using past 18, past the age of 21, that's why the purchasing age of tobacco changed to 21 is for this very reason, to try and push it so that our kids are getting older and older, their brains are more and more developed, to really decrease the amount of youth that could potentially become addictive. Nicotine is a stimulant, and so it increases your heart rate. It narrows your blood vessels, so it makes your heart work even more. It's why we see cardiovascular disease and those types of things with those who use nicotine. It changes the way that synapses are formed and alters the way the brain controls attention and learning. Obviously, attention and learning are really, really important for our high school students. It decreases impulse control. Impulse control is already a struggle for some of our teens. And so, nicotine just kind of amplifies that difficultiness. Decreases the effectiveness of the immune system. And one of the things too, I love that our teens share. However, they may share devices. That to me is just gross. It affects the mouth. I've heard from dentists that sometimes parents figure out that their kids are vaping because of their dental health. They go to the dentist and all of a sudden they have all these cavities or they're having gum issues. And that's from using these different devices. So nicotine withdrawal is also something that can often be a clue that a teen might be using. So when they can't access their device, can't, get that nicotine, we're going to see some of these withdrawal symptoms. Now looking at this list, it's like, okay, a lot of this is normal teenage behavior. So how do you know, if it's nicotine withdrawal or if it's just bad day as a teenager? You know your kid, you know what their baseline is, you kind of know what's going on with them. And so these are just little clues, little things to look out for to indicate whether or not they may or may not be using nicotine. But we often, hear from parents that, oh, they figured out that they were using because all of a sudden they were seeing a bunch of these withdrawal symptoms. So definitely things to look out for: that irritableness, that grouchiness, restless, jumpy, all of those things. Again, I know can be a normal teenager. Other indicators that a teen may be vaping, some of these are more specific to school than home, but if they're taking exorbitantly long showers, longer than normal, they might be vaping in the bathroom. Those mood changes, smelling of minty or sweet scents, whether they're trying to cover up a smell or with all of the different flavors, if they are vaping, it is going to smell of whatever flavor that they're using. So if they're using a strawberry flavored device, you are going to get a whiff of strawberry. It does not last long, not like traditional cigarette smoke, but there absolutely is that scent. Just different paraphernalia, things to look out for. I mean, these devices do still look like highlighters or USB drives. They have hoodies and lanyards and all sorts of things to kind of help hide or use these devices. Some resources for vaping that are really helpful. These are 3 different ones, all specifically for teens. The first one is called Quit the Hit. This is from an agency called the Rescue Agency. It is 100% on Instagram. And the really cool thing about that is kids are on Instagram anyways. And it is all through Instagram. They can sign up for, or they have to fill out a little survey to see if they're appropriate for the program. It's all totally free. They get paired with 10 to 15 other kids across the country. And I believe it's like a 5-week program, and they get daily tips, daily support. They can chat with the other kids who are in the program about the struggles or if they're having cravings. And it's really this online support group for them to really help quit vaping. And it's all through Instagram. So the nice thing about that is if the teen is on Instagram, their friends aren't going to question, oh, they're on Instagram, but they might be getting their daily tip on how to, deal with that craving that they're having, how they can get through another day of not vaping or whatever the case may be, which is really, really cool. The next one is called This Is Quitting. This is through the Truth Initiative. This is a text-based program. It's a very kind of similar thing as Quit the Hit. Daily tips, support, it's, but it's all through text. So again, our teens are texting. So another great way. The last one is another texting one, My Life, My Quit. It's really great that there are these resources out there for teens. All of them are totally free. It can be totally anonymous. They can sign up. Parents don't even have to know. Obviously, we hope that they tell us, but it can be 100% totally on them. And these are really, really great resources for teens if they are struggling or have a friend who might be struggling. So switching over to cannabis. So we've been talking lots and lots about cannabis over the last number of years. So we're going to talk about what it is, THC content, get through some examples, some signs and symptoms, overdose, and then lastly, we're going to cover Delta 8 and Delta 10, which are cannabis derivatives that we are seeing more and more of over the past year. So just really basic, marijuana comes from the cannabis plants. THC, the Delta 9 THC, is what provides that high, that's the psychotropic component from the cannabis plant. It is very specifically that Delta 9 is what we see in dispensaries. This will matter later when we talk about Delta 8 and Delta 10. One of the things that has changed over the years with THC, that Delta 9 THC, is the potency. So 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, the potency, so how much THC is in each cannabis product, was on average about 3%. Now, the average is between 15 and 20% for dry herb marijuana. And then we have all the marijuana concentrates. So this is where we're seeing the oils, the waxes, the extracts. And this is what we see in those vaping devices. A lot of times it's what's in edibles. And those can have extraordinarily high levels of THC, upwards of 95%, which is incredibly high. And so just thinking about something that used to be 3% back in the 80s, now all of a sudden it's 20%, 50%, 90%, just the impact that that THC has on the brain and on the body is significantly greater today than what it was a few decades ago. So when, we look at the different methods of cannabis use, the most common ones that we do see are Still smoking joints, that is still one of the more popular ones, but then it's the vaping is definitely another popular method of use. Dabbing is where you take the marijuana concentrates, put it directly on a heating source and inhale it that way. It's a very, very intense experience. It gives a very significant high. Then we have our edibles and then our topicals and tinctures, which we don't really see too often among teens. So here is a graph to kind of show that increase in potency over the last few decades. And you can see just, especially with those marijuana concentrates, just that upward trend of what it is now versus what it was 30 years ago. I wish it was 2022, but it's 2019, but that's okay. Still, it's probably only increased more, but we can kind of see that really big shift, especially with those concentrates, and just really thinking about how that needs to be part of the conversations. Maybe you as adults did use back in the day. No judgment. It's a totally different substance than what it is now. And so just really being able to think about and understanding what the marijuana is, what that cannabis is today, and how that does impact our teens so much more than what it was a number of decades ago. So these are just some examples of cannabis products that are out there. If you don't want to go into a dispensary and see what's out there, you can go online. Everything you can view the menu of the local dispensaries online. So you can just go to Curaleaf is the local one. And so I just went on, pulled up their website, pulled up their menu just to see what sort of products are out there. And so we have lots of different ones. The top left is more of that dry herb marijuana. Then that top middle is for vape pens, vaping devices. Then we have some gummies and edibles, which interestingly enough, they advertise and label as CBD, but there is just as much THC in those products as CBD. And so there absolutely is still THC in those products, even though it shows, oh, CBD. There is still just as much THC in those as well. The bottom left are beverages. The little squeeze one slightly terrifies me because that's basically how you can get the little bottles of Mio or Method or whatever they're all called, you know, add a few drops to your water bottle and now you have flavored water. Well, they have that for THC. So you take that bottle, it's whatever, it's a pretty high content of THC, just drop it in your water bottle. And now all of a sudden you have THC in your water bottle, which is slightly terrifying because if I saw that, I would have no clue that it's full of THC. And so really being able to know and being aware and increasing your own awareness as to what is out there is just only going to be able to help you talk with your teens and just be more aware of what's going on because there are lots and lots and so many different things. That bottom middle, those are some of the concentrates that people use for dabbing. And then we have more edibles that obviously look like chocolate or gummies, etc. And so just knowing what these products look like is really, really, really important in understanding, having these conversations with your teens so that, you know, they also don't unintentionally have something. So when we're thinking about signs and symptoms of cannabis use, yes, there's the kind of the traditional things that we all think of if someone is high, you know, that sense of euphoria. They have this heightened visual, the sense of visual, auditory, taste perception, their perceptions. They feel like, oh, I can see colors so much more brighter, or taste things are so much better. Cannabis, that THC does act as a stimulant. And so it does actually increase heart rate. And so thinking about our athletes or, you know, those who are engaged in more of that cardiovascular activity, all of a sudden they're using THC and even that high potency THC, you're going to have an elevated heart rate. Your heart is going to be working a lot more. And so if you already need your heart to run track or play basketball or whatever it is that you might be doing, then all of a sudden introducing that THC in the system, it's only making the heart work even more and even faster, which can be definitely harmful for their health. It absolutely decreases coordination, slowed reaction time, decreased depth perception. Those three things are very important for driving. So if you have a driver at home, talking about how dangerous it is to drive while high, kids for the most part, still know it's, unsafe to drive drunk. But driving while high is just as dangerous because, that THC absolutely impacts really critical skills that you have when driving. It impacts concentration, remembering. It very much impacts the hippocampus, which is important in creating and sustaining memories. I have been on the treatment side of things. And when I've worked with high school students in treatment, specifically for cannabis use, the most consistent thing I would hear from them is, I can't remember anything. Can't remember what I need to do for homework. Can't remember where my phone went. Can't remember this. Can't remember that. And really, really consistent messages from them just talking about life is their memory was absolutely impacted. And memory is obviously really important, not only for our students as they're learning and doing all that they need to do for school, but just in general in life. So a variety of things to look for if a teen might be engaging in cannabis use. So one of the things that we also talk about is cannabis overdose. There is a big misperception that you can't overdose from cannabis. You absolutely can. It does not necessarily mean death, like when we think of an overdose for another substance. However, you absolutely can overdose from cannabis. We hear this from emergency departments, pediatricians, et cetera, that you absolutely can overdose from cannabis. And a lot of this has to do with that method of use and those THC levels. And where we see overdoses happen is really with those edibles. So when someone uses an edible and takes THC through their digestive system, it takes 30 minutes to an hour to take effect. So if someone is expecting, if they typically vape or if they know someone who vapes, you feel that high within a couple minutes. I mean, it's pretty fast. However, if you eat it and it goes through your digestive system, and your stomach's got to process it, it's got to do all the things that it needs to do in your stomach and intestines and all of that stuff. So it takes a lot longer to get into your bloodstream and into your brain. And so where the overdoses happen, people, aren't feeling the effects. So then they take more, and then they take more, and then they take more, and then all of a sudden their bodies are flooded with THC, which leads to that overdose. And so what we typically see with an overdose is really kind of the mental component. Hallucinations, confusion, extreme panic attacks, and extreme paranoia. That's kind of what we see the most when someone is having a cannabis overdose, is those aspects. Yes, if there is so much in the system, it could lead to unresponsiveness because it does act as a stimulant on the heart. It could potentially lead to a heart attack. So things like that, but definitely kind of that mental aspect is what is seen kind of the most common when it comes to that overdose. So now switching and talking about the cannabis derivatives, Delta-8 and Delta-10. So these, and without getting way too technical, these are cannabis products that are out there. The difference is it is extracted from hemp, which means if it's extracted from hemp, it has less than 0.3% of the Delta-9 THC. And again, that Delta-9 THC is what we see in dispensaries. That's what's considered a Schedule I drug, regulated by, state and local laws. Here in Illinois, yes, you can purchase for medical reasons and recreational reasons if you're 21. So that's the Delta-9 stuff. So hemp is totally different, regulated completely different, regulated by the Department of Agriculture, totally different regulations when it comes to hemp. However, what folks have figured out is they've figured out how to extract some of those other cannabinoids. There are hundreds and hundreds of cannabinoids in a cannabis plant. We just always talk about Delta-9. So people have figured out how to extract Delta-8, Delta-10. The list is always ever increasing. I'm always hearing about a new Delta something. But because they're extracted from hemp, they don't have to be sold in a dispensary. So they're sold at gas stations, they're sold in vape shops, they're sold online. It's way more accessible to our teens than Delta-9 THC. And how it's kind of marketed in the cannabis industry, Delta-8 and Delta-10 are really marketed as kind of a light weed or a diet weed. It's about 50 to 75% as psychoactives. So those in the cannabis industry are like, oh, if you don't want quite the high or quite the experience, use Delta 8 or Delta 10 products because it's less intense, it's easier, whatever. However, you absolutely still can get high from it. It is still psychoactive. It still can impact our teens' brains just like Delta 9 can, but it is much more accessible. There is a lot of policy happening on this front, even here in Illinois, to try and kind of figure out what to do. Those of us in the prevention field and working with different policymakers, how do we categorize these products along with Delta 9 so that they can't be sold in gas stations and they can't be sold in vape shops, just to really decrease that accessibility. Yes, technically you still are supposed to be 21 to purchase, but we know that doesn't always happen. And so there is policy happening to try and figure out what to do with these particular products, just because they are so much more accessible to teens. Some intoxication from Delta 8 in Delta 10 does mirror that of the Delta 9 THC, but it does have some different effects. Some lethargy, slurred speech, can cause difficulty breathing. So there are definitely some other health risks associated with these particular products as well. One of the other concerns about these products is it's a totally unregulated market. So kind of similar with e-cigarettes, it's unregulated, so you have no clue what's in these products. And so really talking with your teen about being just an educated consumer, and as they just think about what they are consuming in their life, whether hopefully it's not a substance or whether it's soda or what food they're eating, whatever they're consuming, how can they make sure they're educated and know what is going into their body so that they can make those healthy choices. Some of the trends that we've seen in Delta 8 and Delta 10, and this is also true of just normal kind of cannabis vaping products. The pictures on the left are kind of those more traditional vaping devices, cartridge devices, take off the top, but they too, similar to the e-cigarette industry, have really switched to completely disposable products so that you don't have to recharge it. You don't have to, switch out the cartridge. They're very sleek looking, very fancy looking. Some of them still do look like those USB drives, but just kind of the overall look, it looks to be a very sophisticated, fancy product that, they're trying to sell and market as this glamorized thing. The other thing that we see is bakeries that sell Delta 8 and Delta 10 products. This particular bakery is in Northbrook on Dundee Road over by the Dairy Queen. It used to be called Waken Bakery. They very recently, in the last month, I believe, month or two, switched ownership and now it's called Blaze Bakery. But these products are being sold as cookies and cupcakes and really delicious looking drinks and foods. But they have Delta 8 and Delta 10 products. And so just thinking about, and even just what they put on their cookies and just what they're trying to sell. Their motto actually on their website is addictively delicious. And so they're almost even acknowledging or mocking, I'm not sure which, the fact that THC is addictive, but they're calling it addictively delicious. And so just knowing kind of what's out there, and knowing even just you as community members, if you show up at somebody's house and they have Blazed Bakery products, there is THC products, Delta 8, Delta 10 products in there. So just kind of knowing, again, increasing that awareness, knowing what's out there so you can have these conversations. All right, switching to alcohol. I know I'm zooming through all this stuff. So we actually have seen a lot of new trends in the alcohol industry. I feel like the alcohol industry had been fairly static, fairly consistent over the years, but we have seen over the last couple of years, a lot of new products, a lot of new trends that definitely want to share with you. So one of the things we always talk about with teens is understanding what a standard drink is. When we talk about alcohol products, talking about, BAC, blood alcohol concentration, understanding how alcohol affects the body, really understanding what a standard drink is kind of the basics. And so the little picture that I have on the top left of what is a standard drink, the top part is actually what is a standard drink. So whether it's 12 ounces of beer, has the same amount of alcohol as 5 ounces of wine, apparently 3 ounces of sherry or port, and 1.5 ounces of liquor. All of those have the same amount of alcohol. I have debates with middle school students all the time about how that's not true, but that's okay. It is absolutely true. They look at the volume, not the alcohol content. However, if we think about what is being sold in restaurants, off the shelf, at the grocery store, a lot of what is being sold is more than a standard drink. So if you go to a bar and order a pint, that's 16 ounces. So it's automatically 1.25 standard drinks. When you get a glass of wine, a lot of restaurants now sell it 5 ounces or 9 ounces. So all of a sudden, that's almost 2 standard drinks. A solo cup filled to the top, definitely more than a standard drink. So really understanding kind of what that is and what's out there. And then there's this whole trend that we've seen over the last few years of all of these different hard seltzers and fruity, apparently delicious tasting alcohol drinks that are brightly colored, fruit flavored, hides the alcohol taste, that are out there that are definitely attractive for youth. But a lot of these products have a significant amount of alcohol in them. So for example, those beatbox things that you see at the top, one container of those is 4 standard drinks. So it is a lot of alcohol in a apparently delicious tasting container. So, I mean, 4 standard drinks, if you drink 4 drinks in a matter of an hour or 2, that's considered binge drinking. And they market themselves as it's a party in a box. There's lots and lots of stuff on social media that they have, but they very much are kind of targeting youth to use their products. Mountain Dew just came out with alcohol products. You know, so we're seeing this trend in the beverage industry that lots and lots of companies that never were in the liquor industry, never in the alcohol industry, are now all of a sudden selling alcoholic products like Mountain Dew, Sunny D. Didn't even know they still existed, but they now have an alcoholic version of Sunny D. And it's really hard to tell just by looking at the product if there's alcohol in it or not, because a lot of the names, the logos, the coloring are similar to the non-alcoholic components, whether it's by name, the look of the can, et cetera. And so really being able to look very closely, you know, I mean, summer's coming soon at some point, but you know, whether you're at a backyard barbecue, you're at, you know, community events and there is the liquor cooler, but is it right next to the cooler with non-alcoholic beverages? How are you talking to your teens about really knowing and understanding what they're grabbing out of that cooler may to them look like just a LaCroix or some other, you know, type of flavored water when really it could potentially be alcohol. So really understanding what, you know, what these products are. There is, sorry to keep talking about policy. I've been very much into policy lately. There is some policy happening about how these products are sold in grocery stores, because a lot of these particular products, like you know, walk into a grocery store and it could be in one of the beverage coolers by checkout next to non-alcoholic beverages. So really just, again, increasing that awareness of where these products are, where they're located, how accessible are they to our youth, and really being able to talk about what those effects are. There's also, unfortunately, concealment products that are out there. A number of these products, well, I think all of these products you can actually buy on Amazon. But I got these products from, it was a safety worker at another high school. He also worked safety at Lollapalooza. So very insightful into concealment products, but he has seen these all. So whether it's an ice pack, a hairbrush, he has seen the hairbrush a lot. One of the trends that we've seen in the field is taking the Go-Go Squeeze pouches that, like, you know, my 5-year-old loves, empty out the applesauce, put it in the alcohol, because you can just screw the top back on and you never know the difference. And who's going to question an applesauce pouch? So again, just being aware of the ingenuity and creativity. But a lot of these products are available on Amazon. So If you have access to an Amazon account, you can get some of these products that are out there. So just really, really quick, I'm sure all of you know this, alcohol, how alcohol really impacts our brains and our bodies, even more so for teens. It affects our speech, our balance and coordination, our behavior. And this obviously changes as that blood alcohol content increases. We see that mild impairment just after about 1 or 2 drinks, and then it, increases from there. One of the things that is concerning with youth alcohol use is when teens drink, they binge drink. They're not just casually sipping a glass of wine or having a cocktail, they're binge drinking. And so they're bringing their blood alcohol content to that 0.08 level and higher, which can lead to a lot of unsafe, unhealthy, dangerous situation. Judgment, decision-making goes out the window. That's obviously hard for a lot of them to begin with. Their, memory, attention, reaction time, balance, all of those things, loss of consciousness, blood alcohol, alcohol poisoning, et cetera. So one of the things that we do also have data on, again, this is from the Illinois Youth Survey, is the alcohol self-assessment called CRAFT. So this is specifically for teenagers. And as you can see, it is 6 questions to try and figure out if they, as the teen, or you as the parent, should be concerned about alcohol use. And according to our data, according to the Illinois Youth Survey, 21% of suburban Cook County 12th graders experience 2 or more of these consequences, which means that it suggests that they might need treatment or further assessment for potential intervention. So whether that's, driving or riding in a car for someone who was high or been, using alcohol or other drugs. The top 2 actually that 12th graders responded to were the R and the A. So do you ever use drugs or alcohol to relax, feel better about yourself, or fit in? And do you ever use alcohol or drugs while you are by yourself or alone? And I think responding yes to those really speaks to all of the mental health challenges that our teens are facing. We have conversations about mental health and substance use all the time, but if teens are, if they are using alcohol and they are doing it to relax, to cope, to feel better about themselves, or if they're doing it by themselves, that really, really, really indicates kind of that mental health component, and just how much help and support that teen needs if they are using substances for those reasons. Okay, so now getting into other drugs. Check the time. All right, so one of the things that we are hearing more and more about, you've probably seen news stories on, is fentanyl. So really basic what fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. So it's made in a lab that is used in fake pills. We first saw it when, those who use heroin or cocaine, we were seeing the fentanyl kind of laced in those products. And that's where we really first saw it. Now we're seeing it laced and put into other products, but fentanyl is 50 times more potent than heroin and 100 times more potent than morphine. So it is very, 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 very strong. Just that teeny tiny bit that's on the pencil tip can be lethal. So it is a substance that us in the field are paying a lot of attention to, really wanting to bring awareness about this particular substance because it is so dangerous. We are not seeing lots of it here in Illinois yet, but our friends on the coasts have. And even Illinois Department of Public Health, they were just talking to a group of us across the state just about how us as communities should be bringing awareness to this particular substance when it does make its way more so to Illinois than it has. So some of the negative effects that we see of fentanyl are confusion, drowsiness, dizziness, nausea, vomiting, cold, clammy skin, coma, respiratory failure, overdose. So very similar to what we see with an opioid overdose, and just really wanting to make sure we're aware of what those effects are. What we see in the field, it's, people aren't intentionally using fentanyl. It's unintentional. So at Peer Services, we have lots of treatment. One of our treatment programs is a medicated assisted treatment program. And so all of those clients who are in that program have some sort of heroin or opioid addiction. And our clinicians have been talking about fentanyl with them for years. We have fentanyl test strips for our clients. So if they are still actively using, the battery just died on the computer. If they are actively using, then in order for them to be safe as kind of a harm reduction measure, we have fentanyl test strips. We give out Narcan, and we're doing a lot with that particular population. We just had, one of our nurses was just sharing with me today that one of our clients used one of the fentanyl test strips on whatever substance she was using, and it tested positive and she didn't use, which potentially could have saved her life. And so kind of on that harm reduction side, treatment side, there's a lot of work happening in kind of the fentanyl world. But, you know, us as community members, us as parents, educators, et cetera, how do we think about what do we do about the substance that is out there, and how can we really educate our teens about the substance so they don't find themselves in an unintentional situation? I don't want to be super scary. I don't want to like freak anyone out, but it's how do we really bring awareness and be prepared for this particular substance that is showing up more and more and more. So a little test. Who can tell me which pill is fake? I don't know if this is actually plugged in. It's not showing up. Although it's going to die again.
No, this it's very specific, sensitive. Is it running now? Try it now. It seems like it is the brightness.
Right. Anyone take a guess?
Let me go check it out.
Okay. Anyone want to take a guess? Which one's fake? Bottom one. Any other guesses? Yeah, so there are two fake ones on here. The bottom one is one of the fake ones. The top right is also a fake one. So the top left is the only real one. And you know, this is how fentanyl is getting into places. This is how, you know, kids are unfortunately accessing it if they're potentially getting, yes, this is OxyContin, but it can be like, you know, put in fake Adderall or Ritalin or Xanax or any of those things and access that way. So kind of understanding what's real, what's fake. Again, bringing awareness and understanding. The DEA actually has a whole thing on identifying fake and real pills. So you can go on DEA's website. It's under their, it's not the greatest title. One Pill Can Kill is the title of the particular site. Not the greatest, but they have a whole bunch of resources for parents on really understanding what these, you know, what fake counterfeit pills look like, just to again decrease that potential for accessing fentanyl. Then there's also rainbow fentanyl. So that bottom example on the 2 slides ago was rainbow fentanyl. So they're also coloring it to look like candy or chalk or things of that nature. So, you know, why our youth are at risk for this? Why are we talking about this? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, answer the question.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right, right. Correct. Yes, 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 yes. Absolutely. Correct. Yeah, yes, yes, definitely. And one of the things we're seeing, which is on one of the slides, is if kids are buying pills off social media, that is the least safe avenue to purchase them. I mean, which to us is like, well, duh. However, in their minds, it's not always that cut and dry. And so just talking about, because there is the perception, oh, if I take Adderall, it'll help me study, or if I, take Xanax because I'm having an off day, no big deal, even if they don't have a prescription. And so if they are accessing some of these things via social media, then that is going to increase that risk that it could be a fake pill and it could be cut with fentanyl. Fentanyl is incredibly cheap to make, which is why it's being put into these products, because it's incredibly cheap. And so instead of, selling pure heroin, they're cutting it with fentanyl because it's a lot cheaper. And so really kind of understanding that side of things, even though I never thought I would have to understand these things, is important in understanding kind of why fentanyl has become the issue that it is. And so again, why are our youth at risk for this? It, hasn't really hit Illinois significantly. Our teenagers aren't, shooting up heroin and doing all those things. However, that social media component, things are.
Trooper right now. She is a trooper right now. I am so sorry.
Just feel bad for the people on Zoom.
I am so sorry. Technology is not our friend all the time,
Nope.
but you're impressive.
I just keep talking. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but. See, maybe.
It's thinking about it.
It wants to. It really does.
You see me clicking?
I see you clicking. Man.
And she's watching it from
Okay.
home, and what happened is the screen. We tried that before.
We
didn't
did.
Is it sharing the screen now? Do you see it, Kim?
Okay. Let me just, let's try that way.
This is the strangest thing.
Yeah.
Did it go away completely?
Oh, great. I'm not scamming you, I promise. I am.
What about now?
Perfect. No.
I am so sorry.
Can you just click here? Try it all.
What about now?
All right, great. Yes, so that's, I lost my train of thought. But yes, things are being sold through social media, absolutely using social media to get their substances out there. And it is now being laced in other products that we hadn't been seeing before, in vaping devices, cannabis products, e-cigarettes, etc. So one of the things that a lot of folks in the prevention world, coalitions, kind of my field, a lot of what we're doing now is also talking about Narcan and naloxone, which is overdose prevention. So if someone does have an unintentional overdose, whether it's from fentanyl or other opioids, Narcan or naloxone is an opioid reversal medicine that is highly effective. And if someone is not having an opioid overdose, it will not harm them, which I think is amazing. And so I do have a bunch of boxes of Narcan in the back. If anyone wants to take one home, you are more than welcome to. They're the nasal spray ones. So you just pump it into the nose. If God forbid, anyone in your life might be having an opioid overdose. I think every single first aid kit everywhere should have them. They should be accessible just because we see, that unintentional overdose happening. And so we are working on in lots and lots of different communities, just making Narcan a lot more accessible. You do have to ask your pharmacist for it now. Folks are working on making it over the counter. The instructions are in there. It's super easy to use. It used to be like a whole needle intramuscular injection thing. It is not that anymore, thank goodness. So it's just a nasal spray. So please, those of you who are here in person, take a box on your way home. I believe those boxes expire in 2025. So I hope nobody ever has to use it and it just collects dust. But just like you have a fire extinguisher in your house, just like you have other preventative tools, Narcan should be one of those things as well. And we are, through the coalition, working on doing more specific trainings for Narcan naloxone for folks who might be interested. All right. Let's get back to, we don't have time for that. Okay. So what I always run out of time for, how to talk to your kids about all this. So if you haven't started talking to them now, start talking now. If you already have, well done, keep talking about it. Really what we want parents to have is creating that environment where their kids can go to for them about anything, not just substances. At any age, at any stage, we really want to make sure that our kids can come to us about anything. And one of the really important parts, knowing how to support them and knowing what resources there are for them. If they might need help, if they, are concerned about a friend, what resources are at school, some of those vaping quit lines, kind of you being that trusted resource is really, really important. It really comes down to their health and well-being. That's really at the end of the day what we're talking about with prevention. You're coming from a place of loving concern, not anger, even if you think that they might be using. I know as a parent, it's really hard not to get angry about those things, but trying to be super calm, coming from that place of loving concern, being really direct. Like that slide I showed at the very, very beginning. When your kid knows exactly how you feel about whatever topic it is, whether it's alcohol use or e-cigs or cannabis, whatever, when they know how you feel, it is going to absolutely impact that behavior. So being really, really direct, really clear, sending that no use message. Have a plan. We do have one of the cards that we have at the table for those of you who are here in person. It's what we call the X plan. So it's just a really simple process that you talk about with your kid if they find themselves ever in an uncomfortable situation. You have kind of a code word that they can text. And if they say, hey mom, I really want a cupcake, all of a sudden, oh my gosh, no questions asked, go pick them up, go whatever they need, you do it so that they have an out. So that whatever the situation is, they know how to contact you, how to connect with you without judgment, without questioning, get them out of that situation. And talk through specific situations. Talk through peer pressure scenarios, talk through what if there's alcohol at a party, talk about all of these things just so that they can kind of think through and plan ahead. Now we know when they get themselves in a situation, it might not always go as planned. However, at least they've thought about it. At least they've come up with different options, which is really, really important. So kind of going back to that, sending a clear no use message, really, really being direct. Hopefully you understand that. Be very, 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 very clear in that message. And it is not a lecture. I've said this a lot of times, and I know there's at least one person here who has heard me say this before. It is not one 60-minute conversation, it's 61-minute conversations. These aren't meant to be lectures lengthy. Okay, let's sit down and have the talk. Not at all. This is when you're driving to Old Orchard and you drive past the dispensary and you bring it up like, hey, there's that dispensary. It's got some really interesting architecture. What's going on in that building? What do you think? What are you hearing about it at school? The media provides a lot of opportunities to talk about these things. Whatever show that they're streaming, whatever music that they're listening to, whatever, they might be seeing on social media, all of these are really great opportunities to have these conversations that don't have to be, formal or serious. You're just having these conversations so that when they do face a situation, they know they can come to you because you've been talking about these things. Definitely utilizing facts and consequences that resonate with them. So we always talk to teens about why they choose not to use. The one that consistently is number one is being in control of their body and actions. Teens want to be in control. And if you help them understand how using a substance takes away that control for them, that's really impactful. Maybe they're in choir or they want to be in the school musical. Talk about how vaping e-cigs or cannabis can impact their lung health and how it's going to make it more difficult for them to sing or hold a note. Whatever is important for your teen, talk to them how substances can potentially impact that. And again, teens whose parents talk to them are much less likely to engage in use. All right, so utilizing open-ended questions. Tell me about this. What are you learning about this? Hey, I was at this presentation tonight. Here's what I learned. Did you know this? Have you learned this at school? Ask those open-ended questions and then stop talking. Listen to what they have to say. I know there might not always be forthcoming, but give them that opportunity to share what their thoughts are and really listen to them. All right, that is all. We made it. Are there any questions? Those of you who are online, feel free to put them in the chat, and we can monitor them that way. If anyone here has questions, happy to talk through different things, talk about anything more specifically. But I appreciate all of you being here, being patient with technology, and taking time out of your Tuesday evening. Yes, it's Tuesday.
There's currently no questions from those at home.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I really like talking about all of these things. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, being a parent myself, even though they're young kids, it's such an important thing. Even I usually tell more stories during presentations, but I tried not to. But even literally in the last week, so I have a 5-year-old, he's my middle one. The kid's obsessed with like gummy worms and gummy bears and whatever. And he had a play date at a friend's house. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, I need to talk to parents about if they have cannabis edibles in their house. Because if they're gummies and he sees it, he's going to want it. And it's like, oh my gosh, he's 5. Like, I'm not prepared for. And even me, this is what I do. And it was still like, holy cow, how the world has changed and just how accessible different products are and what's out there, and just kind of that norming around substances among adults and what impact does that have on our kids. So, having those conversations with other parents, I didn't put a slide in for that, but that's also a really important component of this too. Talking to other parents, your kids, friends, parents, where do they stand? What are their rules? If they have substances in their home, obviously legally, is it locked up? Things like that. So lots to think about as parents. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I know. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. But I mean, I know. Okay, that's good. But your kids, and then obviously subsequently their friends, if they know that is the process, I mean, then you're making it very clear that I'm not saying that's a guarantee, because unfortunately it's not. But knowing absolutely not, this is not happening in our house, doing those things, taking it seriously, checking in on them, if they're in the basement, finding some excuse to go down there at random times. Oh, I need to get this out of storage today. Which we know they see through that. Like, we know that, but who cares? Like, you want eyes to see what they're doing. And so just really, but when they know that, when you're sending that really clear message and their friends hear it too, you know, that is a huge, huge thing. This was years ago. So it was actually literally the day that the Cubs won the World Series. It will be forever ingrained in my brain. We were invited to a parent's house. They had all their kids, you know, the group of friends and all the parents. And we went to their house. Yes, it was the World Series for the Cubs. We missed part of the game. That's okay. And they really wanted us to talk to all of the kids and all of the parents at the same time. So we were all on the same page, which I thought was such a great parenting thing because they made it clear to all of, and they were 8th grade boys. They made it clear to all of those boys that, hey, we take this seriously. We care about your health and safety and well-being. And they were all there. And all of the parents were so great because they were like, if any of you, I don't care if you're not my kid, if you're ever in a situation, you make sure you have my cell phone, you can call. Like, it was such a great kind of community of parents and kids that, you know, I mean, yes, those kids, I guess, gosh, how old are they now? They're out of high school now. But like, just what a great message from the parents that all of those parents in that group of friends were on that same page, which I think is so cool. So, anything else? Yeah. Right. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. I mean, that yeah. Yeah. I mean, oh, yes. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that is such a real aspect of this. Again, when I've been on the treatment side of things, you know, I worked with a high school girl who knew all the risks and consequences, could list everything that was wrong with cannabis use. And when it came down to it, it was that exact thing. If I don't use, I won't have friends. And that social component is so paramount for our kids. And it is such a hard barrier to get through. But it's thinking through, like, yes, in certain situations, can they make an excuse not to use but still be with their friends? Can they say, oh my gosh, I'm not recommending this? What am I about to say? However, they can blame you, like, oh, they're gonna drug test me, even if you don't, because it's not a good deterrent. But blame my parents that, help them come up with realistic excuses. I know that in the moment is really, really hard. But then also talk to them why they don't want to use. When are they with their friends and they're not using? What activities can they do when they're not using? Trying to figure out those times, whether it's that friend group or a different friend group, to figure out, like, when can I be with those friends and they're not using? Maybe you specifically do activities where it's not possible so that they're not, put in a situation where their friends want to use, but then they don't want to hang out together. And this is really, 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 really hard. But then at the end of the day, they also need to look at who their friends are. If they themselves don't want to use and don't want to be in those situations, and again, I'm not saying this is easy at all, but then for them to kind of think about what is important about the friendships and relationships that I have, and do I want substances to be a part of that? Again, that's really hard for teenagers to do. I mean, I'm not going to minimize that at all. Easier said than done 1,000 times over. But just having really open conversations with them and supporting them and helping them come up with ways and things that, reasons for them not to do. Maybe they do tell their friends, hey, I have a test tomorrow. I don't want to, vape THC because I want to make sure I can focus, etc. Just thinking of helping them plan and come up with those things. So when they are in that situation, they have a response, and they know how to deal with it. It is not always going to be perfect, but maybe instead of using with the friends all the time, it's every other time. Or, and that gets more into kind of the treatment harm reduction side of things. And yes, if you're definitely concerned, absolutely. Us at Peer Services, even the social workers here, the health center here, have them talk to one of the social workers. Absolutely, you can call Peer Services, for additional help and support. But it's that social piece is huge for sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. No.
They're not going to think about it in the moment when the pressure is there to say, oh, what am I going to come up with? Oh, I'm saying my parents. But it's not that conversation yet. Okay, this is your escape law. The same way we've talked about with other parental programs, giving our kids an hour.
Mm-hmm.
That there's no judgment. They have they call mom and dad, I have a tummy ache or whatever it is. If we with safety clauses that we and practice them, they're more likely to.
Yep.
Our students have actually reported that when they knew that in advance and everything worked, when they say, they're not going to let me drug test me, or I think know that parents have to, then here's the lead. So just like Kim had mentioned at the house, it's my food, I have that. So then when her kids say, oh no, I can't try, my mom,
Yeah.
drug testing, her parents will
Even if you never ever drug test them.
even if you never.
Yeah. Because that is not an effective deterrent. It doesn't. But please use it as an excuse. 100%. Absolutely. And again, none of this is a guarantee. I wish it was, but it's not.
Yeah.
Sure. Oh yeah. But sure.
We have two, one takes place next freshman year. It's a major component of the program. Peer pressures, disadvantages. Sophomore year, all sophomores must
And you bring up a really good point that, yeah, it takes a village, and thinking about who else are those trusted sources. is it the coach? Is it the band director? Is it, yes, these messages should be coming from all of these different people. At one of the other high schools that I work at, the athletic director makes all the coaches go through. I mean, it's literally called sending the no use message. And we train all of the coaches at that high school how to talk about this, how to send that no use message, how it impacts athletes, because coaches are very much a trusted source among student athletes, and so, yes, it isn't just the parents. It absolutely needs to be, maybe it's the youth director at church, or so many different places. So then once they start hearing that message from lots and lots of places, I've had students, it was either here or North, I don't remember which. We were doing some stuff in the cafeteria, talking to students, and all of a sudden this, one girl, I think she was a junior or senior, she's like, oh, I remember learning about this health class. Oh, my parents have talked about this. Oh, and I heard it here. And it was like this light bulb went off in her head. All of a sudden, all those pieces came together, and she was like, oh yeah. And I was like, yes, okay. So you never know when it's going to click. But yeah, she heard it in all of these different places, and then was like, oh, right, yes. I forget the subsequent conversation, but it was hilarious that all of these things all of a sudden connected in her brain. And she was like, oh, right, you don't want us to, engage in underage drinking for all of these reasons, that we've talked about. It's like, yes, very good. So. They do.
But when they hear it, from community source, and they hear it from trusted adults, that's where the community. But it really is a aha moment.
It really is.
Repeat things about 50 times, and all of a sudden something.
Yep.
So the more that we're all sensitive, the more.
And that's true not just for substances. For any important topic for teenage development. So. So it's helping them understand. And I say this to middle school students, I'm not going to stand up and say, don't do drugs. I'm going to provide you with all of the information that you need to be able to make a healthy and informed choice. And making sure they have the knowledge, skills, and ability to do that. That's my job. The just say no, don't do that doesn't work. It's really helping them understand personally how it can impact them. So yeah, I don't stand up ever and say, don't do drugs. I always hope your choice is not to use. However, I want you to make that choice based on the information that you have. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. Thanks. Yeah, I didn't
have
even.
any. And you were
No.
such a trooper tonight. Yeah, we've had quite a few log off.
Yeah.
No questions. Wonderful. Well, for all of you who've been viewing at home, thank you so much. We'll go ahead and post this recording via our weekly update next week. Have a good evening.
Thank you.